Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening.
Welcome.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Is there all the banks connected from Bangladesh?
Sorry, what was that?
All the banks from Bangladesh connected in this meeting today?
We invited the ones who were a part of the GYM engagement program, the deep analysis program. All seven or
Mix
eight.
of seven banks.
Yeah, it's our members only webinar, so all of the Bangladesh banks who are members now.
তিনটা ব্যাংক দেখা যাচ্ছে আছে বাইরে, বাকি সব ফরেনার। ওরা তো বাংলাদেশে যখন আসছিল
ওই যে আরবিএম তো সব এই 2 তারিখে যেগুলা শিডিউল করতে হবে আরবিএম সবগুলারই আদনান ভাইয়া।
Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in about 5 minutes.
তাড়াতাড়ি করো, মিটিং শুরু হয়ে গেছে। ওই যে জিমের
ও জিমের কয়টা 27 তারিখে
আমার বলতেছে এরর, আমি বুকার চেষ্টা করতেছি, কোড নাম্বারটা দিতেছি, না দিলে আমরা ঢুকতে পারছি না।
Ahmed?
To everyone who's just now coming in, we'll be starting in about 3 more minutes. So thanks for your patience.
তাহলে কত এটা প্রাইস?
1000 না? একটা বক্স আর কি।
মানে এখন ওইটাই আছে না? হ্যাঁ।
ঢুকতে পারছেন?
আমি তো কয়েকবার চেষ্টা করলাম, কোড দিলাম, বলতে ওরে বলতেছে কেন?
All right, we'll get started in 2 minutes. At 2:05 on the dot, we will be starting. Good idea. What is that? All right. Thank you, Laya, for that, for the lovely elevator music. And just stop and echo.
হ্যাঁ, এই যে আমি দিছি, আমি করেছি।
Okay. We will go ahead and get started. It is 5 past. So hello, everyone, and welcome to our Q2 members only webinar. We're thrilled to see so many of you who chose to spend part of your afternoon, evening, or morning with us. Today we have an engaging agenda planned. So first, we are going to provide a bit of a recap on what the gym has done this year so far. And then we're also going to take a look at those key few features that enable for a more innovating use of the model. So, and then we're going to hear from some of our members themselves on how they've made a more innovative use of the tool. And then we're going to field some questions with them, also opening it up to the audience for questions right after that panel discussion. So if you do have any questions that come up at all, you can put it into the Q&A or in the comments, and we will make sure to get to that towards the end of the webinar. The last thing we want to point out is that we will be having a high-level overview of the new GIM update that is expected to come out soon. So, as a reminder, my name is Rebecca. I am the stakeholder manager at the GIM. I am your go-to for all things membership. So if you ever have any questions, please feel free to email me. All right. So before we hear from Phil and Josephine, we would just like to again welcome and thank you all. Thank you for your continued support and your continued membership. We've added quite a few members this year already. So if you have not already, just a general reminder to schedule your member onboarding session. And then to those members who have been with us for a while and you want to catch up or share any questions or concerns, please also feel free to schedule a member check-in with us. We will provide that link on this deck and also with the recording at the end of the week. Okay, so here we have just a few current happenings that we've been working on this year at the GIM Foundation. So you guys probably know, but in addition to being a membership organization and servicing you all, providing you with your membership, we also collaborate with grant-based organizations and also with our DFI members to provide TA. So first, we want to highlight the conclusion of the FCDO Impact Project that we are wrapping up in Bangladesh. We partnered with the FCDO and Bangladesh Bank to build capacity for ISSB-aligned climate-related financial disclosure in the Bangladeshi financial sector. So we created and provided a toolkit for the whole financial industry in Bangladesh. We hosted a capacity development session in person in Dhaka back in January, and we also worked with 8 financial institutions to do an in-depth analysis of their portfolios. As well as the Bangladesh project, we are working with DEG and Grupo Promerica. This engagement resulted out of an ongoing relationship that FinDev Canada had with Protobanco Ecuador. So we're so grateful to them for introducing this relationship to us. And now we're working with all of the members of the Grupo Promerica to offer them an in-depth analysis of their portfolio and continued support via access to the GIM Foundation and our tool. So this is some of the current happenings that we've had, and we're excited to see what the rest of the year brings. Okay, so to get into a bit of the content of the webinar, in the spirit of unpacking some of those advanced usages of the GIM, first we would just like to remind you that these are the bare bones impacts you get with only your revenue data or your total exposure amount. So already with just those 2 data points, you'll get those GHG emissions, value added, and job supported. GHG emissions are broken down into scope 1, 2, and 3. Value added is broken down into salaries, taxes, and profits. And then job supported is broken down into direct, supply chain, and induced. And then further broken down into male and female, and formal and informal. If you ever have any questions on how to interpret these results, again, please reach out to us. We're here to unpack this and to help you understand what these numbers mean. In addition to providing a refresher on the outputs, we would also like to take this point of the webinar to remind you about some of those additional uses that the GIM offers. So first, we're highlighting ex ante. And this is actually something that Phil will get into a bit later. But we would just like to remind you that the GIM can be used to analyze impacts ex ante. So before you made the investment, you can already get that future projection of what impacts, namely jobs, your investment can support. So when you insert projected revenue or committed investments amounts, the GIM is going to calculate the potential impact of your investment. Some important things to note here are that the ex ante capabilities are focused on jobs supported for now, and forecasts are updated as the International Labour Organization, or the ILO, issues new data. Secondly, the GIM has some interesting power capabilities that you may have not known about. First, the GIM allows you to calculate the impact of investments in energy with increased granularity in GTAP data. So we provide with GTAP 3 additional sectors covering renewables and non-renewables, as well as baseload and peak load sectors. In addition to investments in power, the GIM also calculates power enabling impacts. So the GIM models power enabled impacts when you input power type and power production information. So once you input that, the model can calculate power enabled emissions, job supported, and value added. One little note, if you don't have electricity, there are other inputs that you can put to sort of fill in that data gap. So this is a super cool aspect of the power enabling module. In addition, we would just also like to remind you, when you have direct data, you can insert it. So if you have a direct data point, there is a high likelihood that the GIM, that there's a spot to insert that in the GIM. And when you do that, the GIM will use your data to make its calculations more accurate. And this in turn will improve your data quality in the outputs. So hopefully that provides a good refresher, or maybe you learned something that you didn't know that the GIM could do. And now we're going to turn the floor over to some of our members. So I'm going to give the floor over to Phil Davis, who is the Director of ESG and Impact at Helios, and he's going to explain how Helios uses the GIM.
Rebecca. So good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone, wherever you are in the world. My name is Phil Davis. I'm the Director of ESG and Impact at Helios Investment Partners. I lead our ESG and Impact work across the investment lifecycle, building on over 18 years of experience in sustainability. I previously held roles at the Carlyle Group and at PwC. And for those who don't know Helios, we're a B Corp certified, Africa-focused private investment firm with about $3 billion of AUM. We invest in sectors such as financial services and technology, digital infrastructure, tech-enabled businesses, and consumer non-discretionary. And I work closely with deal teams and our portfolio companies to ensure our investments deliver both sort of strong commercial outcomes and meaningful impact across the continent. So in terms of how we use GIM sort of ex ante, we approach GIM by leveraging both historical knowledge and data from our portfolio companies alongside sort of previously modeled output to calculate the estimated numbers of jobs supported per $1 million invested by sector. This sort of sector-specific approach allows us to sort of estimate employment outcomes broken down by direct, indirect, and induced jobs for future pipeline investments and funds. And what we tend to do is then refine these estimates further by applying sort of demographic overlays, such as World Bank data, for example, to estimate things like youth employment rates, in particular for low income levels, to build a more granular picture of who is likely to benefit. And this helps us to sort of shift from just forecasting how many jobs might be supported to understanding which population those jobs are likely to reach, such as young people or financially disadvantaged groups. And I think the key benefit of using GIM in this way is proactive sort of impact planning. it allows us to provide potential investors with a clear, data-informed view of the employment impact their capital could generate. It also enables us to tailor pre-investment value creation strategies at due diligence stage, especially where we conduct analysis on an individual company. For instance, we can identify whether a company might require, technical assistance support to improve job quality, invest in local hiring, or upskill its workforce. I think that said, the sort of main challenges we see with this is managing uncertainty, in particular with early stage businesses where financial projections may be less reliable, or in sectors where GIM inputs like procurement data are less extensive. And how we tend to navigate this is by sort of cross-checking outputs with internal benchmarks, with deal team insights, and also, sector-specific knowledge. And we also carefully document assumptions to ensure transparency when using this data to inform decisions or communicate with stakeholders. Maybe I'll stop there and we can let others speak and delve into maybe some questions later.
Yeah, that's great, Phil. Thank you so much. We'll definitely have some follow-ups for you, but now we will turn the floor over to Josephine Ennen from IFU.
Great. Thanks, Rebecca. I just had a couple of slides to sort of guide the conversation a bit, but just to introduce myself, I'm Josephine Ennen from IFU. I've been with IFU for about 4 years in our sustainability team, and I'm largely responsible for our reporting, both collecting reporting from our investees and then reporting out to our external stakeholders on our sustainability and impact results of our portfolio. So if you're not already familiar, IFU is the Danish Development Finance Institution, the Danish Investment Fund for Developing Countries. So as a development finance institution, sustainability and impact is at our core. Some other relevant things related to GIM is that our portfolio is between 150 and 200 investees each year, just to give you a sense of what kind of data that we're inputting to the GIM when we're using it for portfolio analysis each year. If you could go to the next slide. Yeah, so this slide kind of highlights our different impact priorities. So for IFU, we're focused on building a green economy and then also a just and inclusive economy. And this translates into 3 priority SDGs that we focus on, which is decent work and economic growth, reduce inequalities, and climate action. And I'm mentioning these today because it directly relates to how we use the GIM. So you can see with decent work and economic growth, some of the key indicators that we use is employment or jobs and value added, both of which are supported by our analysis using the GIM. And then for climate action, of course, we report on our net GHG emissions every year, with which we use the GIM as part of our calculations. And if you could go to the next slide. So to be a bit more specific, for GHG emissions, we do pretty detailed analysis and reporting because climate action is a really key priority for us, and we have a net zero target. So it's really important for us to do pretty in-depth analysis and reporting on this. As you can see, this is pulled directly from our annual report that was recently published, and we go into pretty in-depth here in terms of the emissions from different sectors within our portfolio. Whereas for value added and jobs reporting, these are 2 of many indicators that we report on related to SDG 8 and impacts related to that area, related to economic impacts. So it kind of paints a more holistic picture, and that's what the GIM helps support us with in terms of reporting. And on the next slide, so for GHG emissions, and I've split them into 2 because the benefits of the GIM are a bit different depending on the indicator. So for the emission side of things, the GIM is really useful to us when we have limited data available from investees, because you can make estimations and get results with just revenue, as Rebecca was saying at the beginning, which is very useful for us with investees that we don't receive detailed reporting from. We can still make an estimation. We also find it to be useful for investments into financial intermediaries, including funds and financial institutions, because the GIM offers a pretty detailed estimation, we find, compared to other tools. And also it allows us to quality check higher level calculations. So you can see at the bottom that we have this data quality hierarchy that's based closely on the PCAF data quality hierarchy. So we kind of use GIM as the base level calculation for all of our investees in our portfolio each year. And then if we have more data available to do higher level calculations or reported emissions, then we'll use those numbers instead. But then the GIM results, we calculate it for every investee in the portfolio, and that allows us to kind of do a quality check to see if the numbers are all making sense, which is really useful for us. So then on value added in jobs, we find the GIM to be useful because it's estimating indirect economic effects that are pretty difficult to calculate and report on otherwise. So that's a key benefit for us, that we don't have another tool that can do this estimation. And it can do so, again, when limited data is available. So with those investees that we have limited reporting from, we can still get an estimation, which is very useful. And it can be used for all types of investee and financing instruments, which is very useful. But yeah, so the benefits kind of differ depending on the indicator, but we use all three in our portfolio assessments each year in reporting. So on the next slide. So in the past year or so, we've really been working on expanding our use of the GIM because we're finding more and more that it's a very useful tool. So I wanted to share some learnings from that because I think it could be useful for other members. So the first one is that we really benefited from using the GIM training sessions. Maybe the GIM team can talk a bit more about that in the Q&A section about the details of that for members. But that really helped us better understand the model, specifically the methodology, which also allowed us to improve how we enter data into the tool and ultimately making the results more accurate, and then also to understand the potential applications even better. And ultimately, that's been really helpful to us to use the tool more effectively, which is really nice. So I can highly recommend that. Another thing that we've been working on is aligning our own reporting template that we have for our investees to the GIM input sheet. So for the data inputs that are required for the input sheet, we've asked our investees to report on that each year, including the nice to have or the optional inputs in the input sheet. So this has allowed us to improve the accuracy of the calculations as well, which has been really nice in addition. And then the last is that we're starting now to consider additional applications of the GIM. In the past year, we've really been focused on doing the best we can with, sort of the base level offerings of GIM, I guess you could say. But now that we've believed that we've kind of mastered that a bit more, we're now looking into other applications so that we can use this tool even more, potentially in internal comparisons and more internal analysis of our investees and sectors that we invest to, and potentially more detailed reporting on indirect economic effects, things like this. So it seems like there are a lot of different opportunities with GIM. Yeah, so that's all I had, and back over to you, Rebecca.
Thanks so much, Josephine. I really liked your point, number 2, on having your investees fill in the data with the GIM sheet already provided to them or something like that. I think that's a great practical tip that seems so obvious, but maybe some of us haven't thought of it before. So thanks for sharing that. Okay, yeah. Well, I do have a list of some questions, but it seems like we are getting a lot about benchmarking. So one question I want to pose to you both is, have you been able to use any of the GIM metrics, whether it's emissions, job supported, or value added, to do any sort of internal or external benchmarking analysis? And if so, what did that look like?
So I think from my perspective, we haven't done as yet. I think we're still a little bit on the early stage to do formalized benchmarking. But I think that's where things need to get to. And actually, one of the suggestions in terms of, I think, something that GIM can help facilitate, obviously you're aggregating a lot of this information and data, is could you start to look at potential benchmarks around this by sector, by geography, around some of these areas? Because I think that could be very informative, and on the sort of ex ante in terms of investment decision making, very useful.
Yeah, and I think from our side, it's somewhat similar that we haven't done sort of very detailed benchmarking or in-depth internal benchmarking, but for the GHG emissions calculations, at least we do look, as I showed with what we report on in terms of sectors, you know, that's the kind of comparison we do. I wouldn't go so far as to call it benchmarking necessarily, but it's definitely something, like I said, is a potential additional application that we're exploring with the GIM as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer from both of you. I think also this is something that we're working on the GIM. Yes, Lai is putting a note in the chat. This is something that we're working on to be able to get everyone to agree on how to share their data so that we can provide this in a relevant report, and also in we can do a comparable analysis of it. So yes, Lai is going to jump in also with an added note.
Yeah, thank you. So actually, yeah, I just wanted to echo these words from Josephine and Phil and Rebecca. Something we are in the very, 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 very early stages of considering will be is there interest from the members for the GIM to somehow, you know, keep the data, because as you know, we don't keep any of the data right now. We are not able to see anything you run, but will there be interest for us to keep this data and start a benchmark that will be shared with the members, of course, anonymized? So that's something we will be asking in the future member survey that will come sometime this summer. But just wanted to leave you with that thought piece today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Laia. And Alex also put a note in the chat. So if you guys have a chance, feel free to give that a read and then send a quick note with your answer in there. Okay. This is a question more geared towards Phil. So we're curious to know, you mentioned that you use, I'm hearing a bit of an echo. Phil, you mentioned that you use your ex ante results for proactive impact planning. Can you share a specific example where this ex ante analysis influenced decision making or project design, anything like that?
Absolutely. So I can give one example. So a previous DD we conducted on an agricultural business in North Africa, and through the ex-ante GIM analysis, we forecasted that the company could support somewhere between 25,000 and 50,000 jobs, with a large share in sort of rural agricultural supply chains. And we identified that a large number of these jobs would be seasonal and low wage roles, likely to be filled by women. And that really prompted us to build in interventions focused on skills development, fair contracting, improved HR practices for female workers. So without this sort of ex-ante GIM analysis, these issues may have been, you know, not considered or remain certainly more secondary. So instead, they became more part of our sort of value creation strategy for the business, which has ultimately made, you know, looking to make the investment more inclusive and aligned with both our sort of Helios and also our LP priorities as well.
Yeah, that's really, I think that's a great practical application of what the ex ante analysis can offer for decision making and planning things out. Okay, thank you for sharing on that. I think, Josephine, you guys do a little bit, you don't use ex ante so much, but you mentioned a lot of looking at the metrics and looking at things very, you know, by company or by different sectors. So I'm thinking specifically for GHG emissions, how have you used these outputs to maybe directly engage with a portfolio client or an investee, or how have you used these outputs to plan your engagements with your investees, if you have?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say the results that we get out of Gym don't necessarily tie into how we directly engage with investees very much yet. But it's something, again, that we're exploring, particularly on GHG emissions and kind of thinking about how to approach decarbonization and transitions and these kinds of things. So I think it at the moment the Gym encourages us, and kind of inputting data into the Gym encourages us to really understand the emissions that all of our investees are generating. So at the moment, it's guiding how we understand the emission intensities of different sectors in our portfolio, rather than sort of direct engagement with individual investees. So for us, it's just supporting our analysis and understanding of what's existing in our portfolio and how that relates to our eventual net zero targets.
Okay, that makes sense. Then on Phil, a question for you. You mentioned that you can also use ex ante to decide maybe which of your investees might require a bit more engagement or TA. Can you just talk a little bit about how you get numbers from the Gym and how that plays into how you're going to engage with a potential client?
Yeah, so I guess so one of the things we carefully have to manage is around sort of uncertainty around some of these numbers. So how we try and mitigate that is through sort of triangulation. So we try and validate the model's output against what we know from discussion with the deal team, their knowledge, their sector-specific insights. And this helps us to assess whether the modeled numbers make intuitive and commercial sense. And where we believe that the Gym numbers may underestimate the impact, which can be the case in our experience, especially in sectors like fintech and digital infrastructure, where sort of agents, networks, or platform effects are really hard to sort of quantify and capture, we will make some adjustments. And we've done that through sort of understanding the companies in our historical portfolio, what has been the sort of broader indirect and induced jobs. So I'll give you an example. So Fowry, which is an Egyptian payments business, which was we recently exited from, but we knew that platform supported over 300,000 sales agents within Egypt. And obviously, if we were looking to invest in a similar business with a similar sort of profile, we could look to try and come to some kind of estimate. Now, that might be beyond what Gym would typically quantify, but this is where it's important to use Gym as an informative tool, but not forgetting obviously your knowledge about the sector or the company and making those adjustments. But I think it's about being really transparent about those adjustments, documenting the assumptions clearly, especially when communicating to investors or partners. And ultimately it's about balancing sort of rigor with realism and being upfront about the limits of any model, including Gym.
Yeah, you answered my next question, Phil, which was going to be, how do you mitigate those uncertainties? So that's a great thing to remember, is that the Gym is a modeling tool and triangulation is super important, and also being clear about the limitations of the modeling exercises and what you're reporting on is also very important. So this is a question a bit for... I think this could be relevant for both of you, is how do you communicate the results of a multi-metric analysis like the Gym to different stakeholders? So you might have a super technical stakeholder, and then you may have one that doesn't, care so much about the numbers, but more about holistic understanding. So if you could just give some practical tips on how you present these results to different stakeholders.
Maybe I can start, but I think it relates already to what you were just saying. I think it's really important to always acknowledge, the uncertainties, as we were just talking about, and limitations of the model and the calculations and the data quality and all of these challenges that we encounter with analysis like this. So I think we do our best to kind of be transparent about that, and then also using sort of key language like supported rather than contributed, which I think Jim has provided good guidance on that as well about how to use the results from the model. So I think that's very important. Again, on the emissions side, that's where we're much more detailed in our reporting and our analysis. So there, I think we provide specifically more for different types of stakeholders. So we provide analysis that's more in depth and reporting that's more in depth, so that maybe more advanced stakeholders can also get what they're interested in, while also providing sort of higher level reporting as well on that. So I think we do our best to be transparent about where the numbers are coming from and how we calculate them, which I think is important, and then try and provide a variation in terms of how we report the results for different stakeholders.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, I think when we're thinking about it from an ex ante perspective, there are different use cases. So one is, with an investment committee where, you're looking at a particular transaction or deal and you're trying to future predict, the jobs or economic contribution of that business as part of sort of the impact thesis you want to sort of present as part of that that potential investment. And then we've also used it as part of support fundraising efforts to show what as a fund the fund will deliver. Now the fund's deal pipeline is a moving target. It changes, deals coming in and out. Some of them more early stage, we don't always have the same level of information and detail as we do when we're in a sort of full due diligence mode. So we've taken a slightly different approach with that, which is more around working out the per dollar invested. So looking at our historic portfolio in sectors that we've historically invested in, taking all that historical data and information, the baseline information, where we've got to in the current point of time, and then trying to work out for every dollar invested, how many jobs do we think we've supported across direct, indirect, and induced, and then timesing that by how much we think we will invest across each sector to give a sort of indicative high level idea to a potential investor how many jobs that could support. These things are very much estimates, and we do caveat them as such because they are based on sort of I would say fairly unreliable ratios, but it's sort of useful and indicative and gives a sense of what the potential could be. And we don't give exact numbers, we always give a range, for example, just to sort of give a potential investor a sense of what the potential impact might be. And I think those two are very different use cases, and I think how you present the data is very different between an investment committee versus a potential LP as part of fundraising, and then obviously reporting looking back where you've got the historic data, you can then report this in with a bit more of a higher degree of accuracy.
Yeah, that's definitely an important thing to distinguish is between internal reporting or using it to build business case rather than those external reporting numbers that are going to go out. Okay, well, I think we have a few questions from the audience. So this is from Mr. Avadani to Phil. Do you use the ex ante results for credit decisions?
We don't currently. I don't know if he means credit as in, because we're an equity investor, so we don't have credit funds. Obviously, we help companies to raise debt, but we haven't had a need to do it from an impact linked debt facility or loan or anything like that. We haven't used it for that purpose. I think it'd be quite difficult to use that as well from my experience of sustainability linked loans, because there is a need for a degree of accuracy in order to sort of have something like that. And I don't think these numbers are probably robust enough for that sort of application, in my view.
Yeah, I think, Laia, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I
the
think
numbers.
it's always about being careful, right? You know the gym is there to help you when you cannot get the data. But if you can get the data, that's the best thing you can get.
Yeah.
And therefore you have to be cautious with your decisions. I think that just makes a lot of sense. I see Alex is raising his hand. I think he wants to add something here.
Yeah.
Can I? Yeah. Hi, Phil. So I think I agree with you about kind of ultra outcome based kind of impact bonds more, but I've always thought that if you're clear about what the variable is, then I think you can use this for project preparation. So if your kind of theory of change or change model is that your credit is going to increase sales revenue in a business, and so you sort of think, okay, so we think kind of per $1,000 of loan, we think that sales will increase by $1,500 in our target SMEs in a fund, and you model that, and then you get jobs as the output.
Yeah.
Then the jobs don't change. What the variable that is at test is the sales revenue of the recipient, and that's verifiable.
Yeah.
And so it's perfectly then legitimate to use jobs as the output, because it won't. The only thing that can impact it is whether the sales revenue is achieved or not in the firm. So as long as you're not saying that the jobs is like a sort of proxy for the revenue, but what you're testing is whether the loan actually did increase sales revenue. And as we've sort of found out on a project that Rebecca mentioned in Central America with Grupo Primerica, is that when you look at the kind of asset to or loans to turnover ratios, they vary incredibly in a loan book, and some of these loans don't really change the business revenue at all. They're very ineffective in their kind of stated goal, and some kind of knock it out of the park, and you double sales from an extra dollar of lending. So I think I think the trick is to not to say that your model is delivering jobs, it's delivering sales, and if you stop at that point, then you can use the model.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think where you can maybe have the target as sales, but really linking it to the impact that creates, because the only problem that I've seen with some of these SLLs over time is if an organization such as yourselves changes the methodology for whatever reason, the numbers get thrown out, the targets go all over the place, and it's really hard to then sort of link it all back. So having the hard target as maybe sales revenue, but having in the documentation the reason why we are choosing sales revenue is because we believe it leads to X, jobs, and that's analyzed through the joint impact model or to that effect, without making that the hard target.
Yeah, that's a fair point. So that's members saying, please don't update the model, which is great from our point of view, but I don't think you're saying that.
I think no, I'm not saying. I think it's important that these things evolve and get better. I just think that the problems, the banks and stuff tend to be quite rigid about some of this stuff, and then trying to explain it later is quite a challenge.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Yeah.
Thanks, Alex, for jumping in. Super interesting points. Okay, we have a few more questions still from the audience. So this is from Farida to Josephine. Have you benchmarked GHG emissions estimated by the GIM with some other model? Any other model?
Yeah, so we, for every investee in our portfolio, we calculate GHG emissions using 3 different groupings of estimations. So the highest level would be reported emissions, so emissions that are directly reported from the investee. The second grouping is emissions that we calculate based on physical activity emission factors, so related to production or energy consumption. And then the third is the results from the GIM. So we have an internal tool that we've made that builds on the GIM results that calculates each methodology for each investee, depending on the data that's available from the reporting that we receive from them. But in terms of the specifics on the benchmarking and the comparison, I am unfortunately not our climate expert here at IFU, so I would have to consult with them. for the specifics on the comparison, but I know that we have found quite a lot of difference between the three methodologies and often have to make sort of a judgment call on what's the most accurate or the most defendable estimation to go with for each investee, which we do our best to go through, but with a portfolio of almost 200 investees, that can be sometimes a little bit difficult. Yeah, so I think it's a really interesting exercise that we'd like to spend a little bit more time on to understand better kind of the merits of the different methodologies, and of course always guided by GHG protocol and PCAF when making these types of decisions.
Great. Thanks, Josephine. Yeah, and I think the second part of her question you've kind of already covered, but if there's anything else you can speak to on this one, it'd be great. She also asked, what does your quality check show when you compare portfolio company reported data with Jim's estimations?
Yeah, again, I'm not the climate expert, but some learnings I think from my engagement with the data is, we find that often our investees don't report on their scope 3 emissions as an example, or haven't found a way to sort of accurately estimate that themselves. So that's another thing our tool does. It does the calculation for each scope. So then for each scope, we'll choose a certain, whichever is the most accurate methodology. So we often are using, I think from my understanding, the GIM results for scope 3 emissions for our investees as an example. But yeah, so I don't know that I can give any more detail on that, but I think it is interesting to sort of compare each of these, because again, they do come out very differently depending on the methodology. Yeah. And I think it just gets back to the point that, we do our best with the data and the tools available, which is what's so nice about the GIM, is that it gives an option for how to calculate these sort of somewhat abstract estimations, but it's also always important to understand the limitations of the calculations.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, great. And then for Phil, this is from Samuel at Fidelity Bank. He asked, do you use your findings to support the calculation of CVAR on your equity or credit?
Not currently, no. We haven't used it for that purpose yet.
Okay. Any further reasons why, or anything else to share there?
I think, to be honest, we've not taken it to that level of detail as yet. But yeah, something to consider for the future.
Yeah, Samuel, I really like that idea, I must admit.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, we have time for, I think, 1 or 2 more questions from the audience. And while we're waiting for your final questions to be put in, I have one more question for our lovely panel guests. So just to both of you, what support or resources do you think would help you and others make better use of the GEM's full potential?
So I had sort of 3 things I thought of. So one was sort of sector-specific guidance. So maybe detailed use cases of how GIM behaves in different sectors. So, I touched on some of the differences, digital infrastructure and consumer goods would help users set realistic expectations and maybe calibrate assumptions. Training on the use of ex ante, I think would be useful. So there's a sort of defined methodology and approach pre-investment stage, especially when, you're having to do sort of sensitivity analysis or scenario modeling. And then sort of the peer benchmarking hub, which I mentioned earlier. And I think, there are models such as, the ESG Data Convergence Initiative, which is, a benchmarking initiative. People submit anonymized data and you have access to sort of, the benchmarkable data. So I think, that sort of approach is something that the GIM could potentially adopt.
Yeah, I think those are really good recommendations from Phil, so I don't have maybe so much to add, but I think, again, emphasizing, I didn't initially know that these training sessions were available to GIM members, so I highly recommend that. There is sort of turnover within member organizations. And once you become sort of responsible for the gym, it can seem super overwhelming. So if you're sort of a newcomer to the gym, I highly recommend doing the training session, because once you really deeply understand the methodology and how the input sheet works and all of this, it can be an extremely useful tool. So I would just encourage people to try that out. Yeah, nothing further.
Great. Great tips from both of you, especially on that sector-specific guidance. I think that's definitely something we'll try to implement. Okay, any other questions from the audience before we go into our final point of today? I don't see anything coming into the chat. Alex has his hand raised, so he had something.
Oh yeah, yeah. Hi everyone. I've got some good news, which is the monsoon has just arrived in Islamabad about half an hour ago. So that's about a week early. So Avadani, I think it arrived a week early in Mumbai as well. So that's kind of good news for farmers at the moment. But last week there was massive hailstorms and they damaged all of the solar panels that have just been installed in Pakistan over the last 2 years. So it's kind of I don't know if that's irony or just kind of climate change out of control. But one thing, I've just come from a session with the central bank and the Pakistan Bankers Association, and they're both kind of interested in using the gym at a kind of banking sector level to get a kind of overall picture. And so there's an additional source of benchmarking that we've sometimes used on projects, but we don't have the bandwidth currently to do it systematically, which is that you just download from the central bank the exposure data for the whole banking sector, sector by sector, and run it through the gym, and that will give you a picture per X million, whatever local currency. If you convert it to local currency or convert it to US dollars, for example, you can get a sort of benchmark from the gym of what the typical bank emissions or jobs would look like, and then you can benchmark against that. So Samuel, thinking of Ghana, if we could get the consolidated data from the central bank in Ghana, we could give like some more useful benchmarks. But I still think that actually, if we could kind of find a model where members would share their more detailed and better calculated outputs, and we could sort of somehow anonymize them, then we'd have a much better service than what we can do through that workaround of the central bank. So I just wanted to share that because I've just come out of a training with those two organizations here in Pakistan. I think we did the same thing in Bangladesh, for those of you on the call from Bangladesh,
Yeah.
with the central bank data there.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Alex. Great note.
And Samuel agrees with you, Alex. So
Yes.
that's good.
Samuel agrees.
Thank you, Samuel. That's nice. That's great.
Okay, yes, and to echo what Josephine said, we will make sure that the links to the member check-ins and the onboarding sessions are visible and evident on our website somewhere. So we will make that very clear for everyone, and we will also be sharing those links in this follow-up email that will also include the recording. But before we leave you to the rest of your Tuesday afternoon, morning, or evening, we just have a quick note to share on the new gym. So first, we want to let you know what you can expect from the gym team in the wake of this model being released, and then what you can also expect from the new gym with the software update. So first, from us, you can expect an updated methodology document, a new and improved one that will hopefully be clearer, easier to understand. You will also receive a completed comparison of results from 3.1 versus the new version, with detailed explanations on how these differences will affect results, etc. You will also have a webinar following the launch to field all your questions. So you may notice today, very strategically, we put this section after the Q&A. We're not going to be fielding questions about 4.0 today because we will have one following the launch to make sure everyone has all of their questions or concerns addressed. What to expect from the actual new update itself. You will have faster data processing times, increased capacity, and scope 3 downstream coverage. So that is what you can expect to look forward in the new GIM. Right now, it is the new model is being assured by KPMG. And so once we have received that entire assessment, we will be able to share with you our release date. This release date will be given to you about a month ahead of time. So we'll give you a month's notice of the actual, before the actual release. And then we are going to give you all of these materials that will hopefully make the transition as smooth as possible. We don't anticipate a ton of changes in the user interface. So if anything, the user input sheet will be easier for you to understand and input data, hopefully. So I think that is all we had on the agenda today. I don't know if Laia or Alex wants to share any final words, but thank you everyone for joining. We will be sharing this slide deck as well as the recording by the end of this week. Please schedule your member check-in sessions or onboarding sessions if you have new members joining the team and they need to be caught up. But other than that, thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Josephine. That was really great.
Yes, thank you to our panelists.
Please do
Thank you.
reach out for any questions.
you.
Any other
Thank you.
members
Keep you
who'd like
posted.
to do a show and tell, you're very welcome to book in with us. Um,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wish you a lovely rest of the day.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye.
That's great, Rebecca. Thanks. That's very nice.
Thanks, Alex. Glad you were able to join.
And
from
Putri, thank you
Pakistan.
for doing that that Pakistan Central Bank stuff. It was very well received.
Yeah, thanks to Mia and Christopher as well.
And Christopher, yeah.
Glad
Yeah.
that you enjoyed. Yeah.
So the Bankers Association wants to do a impact report, consolidated impact report for the sector. So I was trying to convince them to use the GIM for that. So there may be more to do.
Great. Nice evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, Mr. Avadani. Hope you're well.
Yeah.
We'll speak
Oh, yeah.
soon.